Hey guys, we have experienced a rough week, to say the least. It's hard for me to articulate what is going on inside. It's hard for me to articulate the way that I feel in these moments, what is happening in our nation, what has happened in Minneapolis and with George Floyd and the division that we are seeing. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around such injustice and brokenness and hurt. And I'm thankful that God has given us a category for that hurt and that experience. It's called lament. And lament reminds me of when I was a child and my grandma passed away and I didn't know how to feel. I just felt angry. I just felt upset that God would take this woman out of my life who I love so dearly. And it took my friend coming over and talking to me, and the words that he spoke to me were healing. And he said to me, it's okay to cry. And I don't know where you're at in the last week or how you feel or what is swirling in your heart and your mind, but if I can speak to that and share with you, it is okay to cry. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to be upset and to be angry, to be outraged at the fact that life would be taken, that riots would be happening, that innocent lives would have to suffer tragedy in this tragic time. There are Psalms that we can turn to, as we have seen that Psalms speak to every season of our soul. Now, Psalm 13 is one of those, and we want to look at it briefly. But others are Psalm 42 and Psalm 43. But Psalm 13 begins like this. The psalmist says, "How long, Lord? How long? How long will this continue? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long will I store up anxious concerns within me? Agony in my mind every day. How long will the enemy dominate me?" But what the psalmist does is he doesn't stay there. And some of us, you and I, we can't stay in our lament. We cannot continue to stay in our sorrow. What we need to do is we need to get from lament in this language of the hurting, grieving soul, understanding that God understands us in these moments. So we need to move from lament to joy. We realize that truly and deeply and honestly, if we do not experience the full range of lament and sorrow, there really is no true and deep joy. And we see this in Psalm 13. Psalm 13 continues. He says, "Consider me and answer, Lord my God. Restore brightness to my eyes." He is pleading with God that he would restore the joy of life. He says, "My enemy will say, I have triumphed over him, and my foes will rejoice because I am shaken, but I have trusted in your faithful love." You see, lament is sorrow, but lament is not sorrow without hope. It is sorrow that is rooted in hope of a God that is faithfully loving us, and he is never turning away, and he is for you. And he's reaching for you, and he knows, and he cares, and he is not far off. I find it interesting that during this coronavirus season, we have had to distance ourselves from each other. But in the season of lament that we are currently in, God is drawing near to us in our brokenness. David says, "I have trusted in your faithful love. My heart will rejoice in your deliverance. I will sing to the Lord because he has treated me generously." God has not forgotten you. He has not forgotten those who are humble in heart and those who seek his face and those who seek to do what is right. He has not forgotten you. So in your lament and in your sorrow and in this watching of the world and wondering where is God, continue to hold fast to the promises that he has given us and continue to look at his word and to see this is what he requires of us as believers. Micah 6:8 says this. He says, "What do you require of man?" And he says, he has told you, "Oh man, what is good and what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly before your God." To do justice, to do what is right, even when no one is watching. To do justice even when it's hard. To do what is right, even when no one else is doing what is right. To stand up for those who are not being stood up for. To love kindness, love God, and to do what is right and walk humbly with your God. A heart of humility. That is what God desires. Not a heart of pride that knows all the answers, but a heart of humility. And so 3 closing things. A heart of humility does these things during seasons of lament. A heart of humility during a season of lament listens. It leans in and it listens. And listening well leads to loving well. Number 2, a heart of humility during a season of lament asks good questions, because it really is the only way to address the issues. And when we ask good questions in our own seasons of lament, after listening well, we ask good questions of the Lord and we seek to discover what he has for us. The third thing we can do with a heart of humility in a season of lament is to act on what God has told us to do. He will give us things to do after we have listened well, after we have asked good questions of him, or in the current situation that we are in. If you are lamenting with a brother or sister that is in the middle of all of this, in all of this turmoil and all of the racial tension, lean in, listen well. Don't have an answer right away, but listen well, to love well. And then ask good questions. Ask really good questions to clarify, because in my heart, I am hurting. I am lamenting for what is happening in our nation. And I bet you are too. And in these moments, it would be really, really easy to either remain silent or to say the wrong things. So lean in, listen well in a season of lament. Ask really good questions and then act. Act on what the Lord would have you do in these circumstances. So be quick to listen, slow to speak, and let's be quick to love. Let's deal with the things in our own hearts in these seasons of sorrow, realizing that God does great things in brokenness, in lament, and he reminds us of his promises. He reminds us of who he is, because in these sorrowful times, we realize that on the other side of it, we have hope. We have joy waiting for us, that sorrow lasts for a night, but joy comes in the morning. So hold fast to this. Do not minimize sorrow. Do not minimize lament, but realize that in these seasons, God is so close. He is so near. And one last thing, he is not afraid of any question that you have for him. He is not afraid of it. Psalm 13, the psalmist says, God, where are you? How long, O Lord? And in Psalm 42 and 43, he says the same thing. When we cry out to God and when we wait for him, when he finds us in our moments and in our need, and you find and feel the comfort that he has for you, that is where joy is found. That is where hope is found, and that is where your faith is strengthened. So rest in this. There is sorrow now. There will be seasons of lament and loss and sorrow and sadness. But in those moments, God works.